Dear colleagues, dear audience, dear panelists, dear participants of the 29th Seminar for Rural Development of the SLEs, dear postgraduate students of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation, I warmly welcome to the 20th Development Policy Days. My name is Susan Nebel. I'm the director of the seminar and will introduce this talk before giving the floor to the panels. 20 years of Development Policy Days. That is a long time, 2 decades. Debates on development policies. It seems strange. Why can you debate on the subject for 20 years? It's all about cooperation, first of all, between the SLE and the Heinrich-Böll Foundation that works very well for the last 20 years and that meets an increasing interest in this debate, while we are still very well known in Berlin already for these high-ranking development policy discussions. But it's very difficult to develop these kinds of cooperations because very often these kinds of cooperations just simply run out or cannot be developed. Why does it work so well? We have a training goal. We have those postgraduate students who learn on the subject and enter the professional field together with the postgraduates. These development policy days are very well prepared. They are not only busy with the organizational work, no, they choose the political subjects. They prepare the contents and also produce the videos that we show, and they also select the experts that we will discuss with. That is the second subject that is very important. We invite high-level experts who present high-ranking expertise and are able to discuss the pros and cons of highly political, very important subjects, and permit for a very good learning format. So it's a young personnel, and as one of the seniors, I am in favor of this because I think most panel discussions are mostly led by the older ones, and I think the younger generation knows how to do this job very well. This is what I'm very impressed with. I like it. The format is very successful. 20 years of discussions. How does it work? Which subjects are treated within this format? And my colleagues have prepared word cloud to show you the subjects on the agenda. What can you see? Especially climate protection, disaster prevention, conflicts and how to overcome them, rural development, fight against poverty and hunger, environmental protection, development financing, and many, many other subjects as well. And the most important focus is on development policies. It's all about the approaches on how we, those who work in this field in the global north can better cooperate with populations in the global south in order to permit the development of greener and positive development policies. These cooperations addresses mostly countries of Sub-Saharan Africa, which altogether legitimate because cooperation work focuses mostly on these countries. In the center, we do not only discuss the problems that I enumerated, but also the approaches to solutions that are high on the agenda, because there are always new approaches to overcome these problems. We have just had this morning a session on the European Green Deal and how to implement cooperation in this field with Sub-Saharan Africa in a socially and economically successful way. Can it be done and how? And right now we'll treat the subject of the smallholder digitalization Sub-Saharan Africa. We want to know, is it realistic or is it just another magic word that is totally hollow? I think with this development policy days, we want to promote the development goals. We want that policies change and improve and that they will be implemented. Those are the overreaching goals. And with these words, I hand over the floor to our panels. And during the next few hours, Johanna Küges and Joel Handler will moderate this session, and we'll now continue the discussion in English.
Thank you, Susanne, for this warm welcome and for this introduction. My name is Joel Handler, and on behalf of my co-moderators, Johanna Küges and Nicolo Manich, I would like to welcome you to today's panel discussion, Trap or Trampoline, Smallholder Digitalization in Sub-Saharan Africa. So warm welcome from our rainy Berlin. I hope you have a nicer and cozier place. Before we start, some housekeeping. Die folgende Veranstaltung wird komplett in englischer Sprache stattfinden. Für alle, die der Diskussion in deutscher Sprache folgen möchten, finden Sie unten in der Zoom-Leiste einen Button mit einem Globus. Wenn Sie auf diesen klicken, können Sie die deutsche Simultanübersetzung auswählen. Diese Funktion steht Ihnen allerdings nur zur Verfügung, wenn Sie die Desktop-Version von Zoom heruntergeladen haben. Und wenn Sie der Veranstaltung mit der Browser-Version folgen, haben Sie diese Funktion leider nicht und sie steht Ihnen nicht zur Verfügung. Falls Sie hierzu technische Fragen haben, können Sie diese in der F&A-Funktion stellen.
You can ask them in the F&A.
I proceed now in English. We would like to point out that the simultaneous translation tool is only available in the desktop version of Zoom. Unfortunately, this is not possible with the browser-based version. For those of you who would like to have English subtitles, please click on the notification box, live transcript, and afterwards select the option, show subtitles. If you need any further information about today's discussion, maybe the schedule or more information about the biographies of our panelists, you can download the handout in the following link. The download link will appear now in the chat. All right, let's get to it. During our time together, we will discuss for about 1 hour the potential risks and benefits of smallholder digitalization and the role of state actors, the private sector, and development cooperation. Afterwards, we will open the panel to questions from the audience for about half an hour. In the last part of the event, we take a closer look to the future of smallholder digitalization, and each panelist can share her or his vision about the future. In case you have any question now left, my partner Nicolo will introduce you to the question and answer tool.
Nicolo. A warm welcome from my side. So if you want to ask a question to our panelists, you can use the question and answer tool in Zoom, which you can find below. Please indicate which of the experts you would like to address your question to. You can write your question throughout the session and we will collect them and then ask as many as possible in the designated question and answer session in approximately 1 hour. You can write your question in either German or English and we'll do our best to translate them. If you have any technical questions, for instance, regarding the translation or the subtitles, please also post them in the question answer section. Our technical support will try to reply to them immediately. With this, I hand over to Johanna.
Thank you, Nicolo, and a warm welcome from my side as well. We are very happy to welcome our 4 expert panelists, and I therefore invite our 4 panelists to turn on their cameras now. Firstly, I am pleased to introduce Myriam Said, who currently works as an advisor at the Office of the Prime Minister in Ethiopia on efforts in transitioning Ethiopia to a digital economy.
Hello.
I am also excited to welcome Lena Bassermann, Policy Advisor for Food and Agriculture at Inkota Network in Germany.
Hi.
Also with us, I'm delighted that Daniel Wanjama is joining us today. He is the founder and the coordinator of the Seed Savers Network in Kenya.
Hello, I'm happy to be here.
Moreover, Janina Kaiser is with us, Head of New Business Implementation Africa at the K+S Group.
Hello, everyone.
Before we deep dive into the topic, we would like our panelists to introduce themselves and hear from them how they relate to smallholder digitalization in Sub-Saharan Africa. Mrs. Said, could you introduce yourself and your background and tell us how your work impacts smallholder digitalization?
Yes, thank you, Johanna, and greetings from Ethiopia to everyone. I hope you're all well and safe, and I'd like to thank the organizers for having me today. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you this afternoon. So I'm in Addis Ababa in the Office of the Prime Minister as an advisor on the transition of Ethiopia to an inclusive digital economy. I was previously at the Ministry of Innovation and Technology, where I had the privilege to lead the National Digital Transformation Strategy called Digital Ethiopia 2025. In that strategy, agriculture was identified as the backbone of our economy, and or it is the backbone of our economy in all our transformation plans. And we are very cautious of the fact that digital has the potential of transforming and the empowerment of smallholder farmers from input to access to market is very important. So I really look forward to discussion and to learn from all of you. Thank you.
Mrs. Bassermann, could you also tell us a bit about yourself and how you consider smallholder digitalization in your work?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Also, thank you from my side for the invitation today. I work as a policy advisor for food and agriculture at Inkota, which is a development policy network based in Berlin. I work on the topics of food systems, transformation, agroecology, and food sovereignty. And in this context, we have been working on digitalization in agriculture since 2018. And I also had the opportunity to visit projects dealing with digitalization and smallholder farmers in Zimbabwe. Since then, we have been focusing on the opportunities and risks that digitalization can have for smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan African countries, with a special focus on questions of inequality and digital divides, but also on market power and concentration. As Inkota, we have published several papers on the topic, including Blocking the Chain, which is about corporate power and big data platforms in the global food system and was written by Pat Mooney. We also hosted an expert panel at the Global Forum for Food and Agriculture in 2019 on these issues, where we also focused on small-scale farmers. In this context, we were also following some policy debates, for example, like the developments and discussions on FAO level in order to establish a digital council for food and agriculture. Over a period of about 1 year, we also coordinated a process to develop a civil society position paper, which has been published in 2020. This position paper with the title Political Guidelines for Socially Just and Ecologically Compatible Digital Agriculture has been signed by more than about 20 German organizations. And in this paper, we have formulated the conditions that digital agriculture must meet globally in order to contribute to the goals of ending hunger, reducing poverty, and protecting the environment and climate, while also protecting human rights, with rights we very much focus on along the entire supply chain. So I will have the chance to go into the contents of this paper later in more detail. So yeah, I look forward for an exciting exchange today.
Mr. Wanjama, would you also introduce yourself and tell us how your work relates to smallholder agriculture digitalization? I'm sorry, you're still muted.
So thank you, Johanna. And yeah, so my name is Wanjama Daniel. I'm the coordinator of Seed Savers Network in Kenya. And the Seed Savers Network is a grassroots kind of a network of farmers who save their own seeds and who ensure there is a seed access. People might be wondering why seeds could not be accessible to small farmers. But it's basically the reason is that the farmers, the smallholder farmers are interested in certain seeds that do not come to the market in the normal system because they are not authorized by the law to come to the market. And the companies which could be selling them are not interested in those seeds. Therefore, the only way that the seeds are available to the farmers is through farmer to farmer kind of network. And this is what it is. This is what we have as in Kenya. We have 58,000 farmers who are exchanging seeds and moving seeds from one farmer to the other. We were organizing seed fairs in the villages so that a farmer could come to the seed fair and buy seeds and get to the other. And then we realized there are limitations in that, so that the seeds that are needed by farmers who are far, they're not able to travel to that village to come and buy seeds or get the seeds or get involved in the exchange. So we established seed exchange platform 3 years ago, where we are uploading seeds of various types, especially vegetatively propagated materials that are not available in the shops, such as cassava, sweet potatoes, and the like. And people who are interested in them are able now to log into our system and be able to contact the farmers who have them, and they're able to get them by either paying through M-Pesa and then being sent the seeds through courier. So that is our involvement in the digital kind of work in the small order farmers kind of engagement. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Mrs. Kaiser, could you also tell us a bit about yourself and tell us where the digitalization of agriculture is relevant in your work?
Sure, thank you, Johanna. Yeah, my name is Janina Kaiser. I have a background in international business, and I've been with the K+S group for over 8 years now in different capacities. The company had a charity project in Uganda for over 5 years, 2013 to 18, and that's where we saw a lot of potential in smallholder agriculture in Africa, and really also saw how private companies, private local companies can take a big part in developing that ecosystem. So I moved to Ethiopia in around 2017 and have been managing the investments into 2 local companies in Uganda. And then also we presented K+S on their boards and been working quite closely with the management there in further implementing the business that the companies are doing there on the ground and building that partnership. So what we are trying to do is to really build that ecosystem around smallholder farming, both on the physical value chain side and then also from the digital perspective. So physical value chain to make sure, for example, that smallholder farmers are getting the right agro inputs like seeds, like fertilizer, and making sure that they're of quality. And then also making sure that they have a transparent marketplace at the end of the season where they can sell their produce. It's nice when you do everything right throughout the season, but when you don't have a proper place where you can sell your produce at a decent price, then that's kind of all for nothing. So one of the companies we invested in is focusing on that physical value chain, providing agro inputs and buying, for example, coffee and grains, processing it and then selling it on to key accounts, for example. The second business that we invested in is called Easy Agric and is a digital platform. So the idea here about the digital part is really connecting the different solutions for smallholders that they need. And it's more or less, it's a means to connect those solutions. So making sure that, you can build the access to the companies providing the inputs, that you can build access to the marketplace, that you can provide knowledge to farmers through the platform, and also through their data, also being able to do micro lending for farmers, for example. And then, focusing on the most important parts, but over time you can add on further solutions as the platform is maturing and as the ecosystem is maturing. So we very, very strongly believe in this connect between digital and physical supply chain, but also that both needs to work in order to make this happen. So I'm very much looking forward to the discussion today. And I think let's get started.
Thank you for introducing yourselves. We are very excited to dive deeper during today's discussion. Before that, we would like to play a short video to introduce the topic of today's panel discussion: the digitalization of smallholder agriculture in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Trap or trampoline, smallholder digitalization in Sub-Saharan Africa. Digitalization. Everybody's talking about it, but what actually is it?
According to the Oxford Dictionary, it's the process of changing data into a digital form that can be easily read and processed by a computer. But digitalization is more than taking pictures of Polaroids with your phone. Nowadays, it's widely understood as the integration of digital technologies into everyday life by the digitization of everything that can be digitized.
I get it. Sounds like a big deal. But what on earth does that have to do with agriculture?
Some people, cleverer than us, define digitalization in agriculture as the use of digital technologies, innovations, and data to transform business models and practices across the agricultural value chain. This includes production, post-harvest handling, market access, finance, and supply chain management. It seeks to achieve greater income for smallholder farmers, improve food and nutrition security, build climate resilience, and expand inclusion of youth and women.
I'm not sure these people were cleverer. What the abstract heck does that mean?
In reality, this can mean anything, from a Kenyan farmer buying seeds at the best price with a tap on her smartphone, or a smallholder in Zambia selling his produce via an app, all the way to the cooperative in Nigeria digitally obtaining information on farming schedules and plant diseases. Trends we're seeing in Africa alone comprise digital solutions for irrigation system, rural connectivity, commodity exchange and ag commerce, precision agriculture, crop disease diagnosis, documentation for smallholders, livestock and farm management, alternative credit scoring and saving, insurance to farmers, sharing platforms for tractors, storage and cold chain, geospatial information, hydroponics, urban farming, market access and information, finance for farmers, crowdfunding for farmers and livestock, crowd farming, high-tech for improved yields, advisory services, forecasting and monitoring.
Wow, slow down, buddy. So it spreads like wildfire and changes everyone's life for the better?
Not exactly. There's a huge gap between those able to benefit from the digital age and those who are not. Especially when it comes to smallholder farmers in the global south, a vast majority of people remain with limited to no access to digital infrastructures. Many also lack the digital literacy to reap the full benefits of digitalization to their advantage. This is commonly known as the digital divide. And what's more, Existing challenges such as gender inequality, rural marginalization, and economic disparities are further exacerbated by this digital divide.
So that means if you're a woman from a disadvantaged rural community in a poor country, your chances of benefiting from digitalization equal zero, right?
That's right. Digitalization goes beyond digital tools themselves. For instance, education is needed for digital literacy, and basic infrastructure like electricity is needed for internet access. In Chad, for example, far less than 10% of people have access to electricity, so digital solutions are simply out of reach.
But even if only a few benefit, isn't that good enough?
Well, if equitable distribution and sustainability are not taken into consideration, smallholders could face real-life threats. For example, multinational corporations could collect, use, and abuse smallholder data by capitalizing it. Smallholders might also struggle to survive and can be easily pushed out of the market by those with a comparative digital advantage. On top of that, they might fall prey to the debt trap when seeking to enter the digital race. All the while, the rebound effect in which contrary Teil believes efficiency gains lead to a higher rather than a lower use of resources overall might put additional pressure on ecosystems.
That's all global. Why are we only talking about Sub-Saharan Africa today?
Because Sub-Saharan Africa epitomizes these potentials and pitfalls. Not only do smallholders account for 60% of the African population, on no other continent the digital divide is more blatant. While in Kenya there are more active SIM cards than there are Kenyans, not even 15% of the population in South Sudan owns a phone.
So, is smallholder digitalization a trap or a trampoline?
In the first part of our discussion, we would like to explore what the digital transformation of smallholder agriculture can look like in Sub-Saharan Africa. We will also discuss who is left behind in this process and who can actually benefit from it. In the meantime, we would like to remind the audience to pose any questions that may come up during the discussion in the Q&A tool. We would like to start this discussion with some experiences from the ground. Mr. Wanjama, you mentioned a seed exchange platform in your introductory statement. Could you tell us a bit more how the Seed Savers Network works and how you utilize digital tools?
Thank you, Johanna. So the digital tool to us, or the seed exchange platform, is a tool that is helping us conserve local varieties. So it can be used to conserve agrobiodiversity in the sense that the seeds or the varieties that are criminalized by the law and the policies that we have on seeds can be able now to move from one corner to the next because digital space is not yet regulated, in the sense that it is illegal, for instance, for farmers to sell seeds to the farmers which are not certified. And the area that is inspected by the authorities is the shop where the seeds are sold. So if you have the online kind of communication system where farmers' information is there with the kind of the seed that they have, anybody who wants, they don't have to go to the shop, and therefore authorities cannot go every home to inspect, but they can be able. But now farmers can be able to access the seeds of the crops that they don't find in the shops, and this, as I was saying before, they are not found in the shops because a lot of time the seeds that are legal, or the seeds that are coming, that are in the market, that are coming through the shops, are basically imported. Those are the seeds that are able to meet the requirement set by the regulations or the policies. And you'll be surprised, these seeds amount to 95% of the seeds that we are using. or the seeds that are in the shops. But the seeds that are needed by the Kenyans, especially for traditional crops that are important for food security, are not found in the shop. So about 80% of the seeds needs of small farmers are coming from farmers themselves. They're not coming from the shops. So to enable farmers access these seeds, we were doing seed fairs, a lot of like physical meetings where people could bring their own seeds, show seeds and all that, and they're able to exchange and share. But we realized that has limitation on its own. The seeds are not able to move far. So that is why we came up with this digital network, the platform for seed exchange, that we upload farmers' seeds and we upload the contacts so that anyone who needs certain seeds can just call the farmers and be able to get the seeds. So, and that also somehow eliminate the necessity for a shop or the necessity for a middleman. The seeds can just move freely and they can be sold by the people who are growing them. And the people who are selling these seeds are not seed sellers as such. These people are growing food. So their interest is like, if they are growing food, they have to reserve part of the crop for seeds. And what is reserved is now sold in that system or exchanged in that system. But our role as a Seed Savers Network is to ensure some sort of quality control, in the sense that we train the farmers who are bringing seeds online, and of course, mostly on how to select seeds for better quality, and also on how to maintain cleanliness in terms of pests and diseases, so that the pests and diseases don't move to other places. And of course, because there is no regulation, then no one is coming to challenge what we are doing.
Now, in Kenya, the usage of smartphones is already quite common, while in other countries, only few even own a mobile phone. Furthermore, within the country, mobile and internet connectivity can vary tremendously, with rural and remote areas often being left behind. Mrs. Bassermann, when we look at the so-called digital divide that was mentioned in the introductory video, what are the main challenges countries with a lower network connectivity face?
Yes, I think there is a certain risk of increasing inequalities between countries, but also within countries, between urban and rural areas, between men and women. You already mentioned in the video the gender divide. So and when we have a look at the global numbers, I think it's especially with regard to Sub-Saharan African countries and LDCs in general, it is quite concerning because there we see quite a big divide. And I want to give you an example. There's a gender score which is regularly collected that says how evenly or unevenly access to the internet is distributed between the genders. So, and in Africa, that inequality has grown by 30% in only 6 years and is higher than any other region of the world. So today, almost twice as many men as women use the internet. And also globally, this figure has increased slightly. And that's not the only disparity. So when we see that in African countries and in LDCs, in total, about 1/3 of people use the internet, but most of them live in urban areas. Rural areas are particularly disconnected. And there are much more examples. So if you have a look at the cost of internet services in African countries relative to the income of the people, you see that the cost for using the internet is about 10 times higher than in Europe or North America, and as much as 5 times higher than Asia or Latin America. So, and there's a similar situation when it comes to broadband coverage. So what I want to say, there's a certain risk in also even increased inequality, and not only between countries, but really within countries and between group of people within the country, societies. And so there, I think there's a big need to make availability of internet and internet services equal, and also to have have access justice. That must be guaranteed in order to really leave no one behind and have a really inclusive development here.
Mrs. Kaiser, what is K+S's view on this topic, and how does K+S address these issues caused by a digital divide?
Yes, I agree. That's definitely a very big topic also for us. For sure, you know, if everyone had access to a smartphone, I think it would be much easier to implement certain solutions. I think from a business perspective, it's always easier to reach, we call them smartphone farmers, but really let's say the more interesting customer segment of the farmers that don't have a smartphone, that's really where the potential lies. And that's eventually whom we want to be able to serve. So how we are approaching this topic is through an agent network. So essentially we have agents out in the country, in the different areas. For one, agents in terms of from a supply chain perspective, so where agro inputs can be moved to in order for the farmer to have access to, but also where produce can be stored basically on the way to the processors. So to make sure that, for example, the maize at the end of the season is stored properly, doesn't get wet, and there's no mold or aflatoxins that can build. So this is extremely important from a supply chain perspective. We're also working with so-called village agents. They are preferably the younger people in the community who have a smartphone, and which also provides good employment opportunities for young people out in the countryside, which we also all know can be quite a challenge. So village agents have a smartphone, they can go to the farmer and they can work with them on this basically. So they can order inputs for the farmer, they can offer the produce on the platform, they can give them access to knowledge. They're basically the bridge between the smartphone and the farmers who don't have it. And secondly, what we also find very important is that there's a lot of people have moved to the city. So there's a segment of urban farmers, but also people who move to the city who have relatives or friends who are farming back at home. And they're actually also great agents because to some extent, not actual agents, but can be used somewhat as an agent because they have a smartphone. They can get inputs for their community and take it back when they go, and they can also make that connection. So it's basically also utilizing urbanization in order to build that access to the rural farmers.
Now you talked about the divide between rural and urban farmers, and you're addressing young people. Mrs. Bassermann also mentioned the gender aspect. Do you also see that in your work?
Yeah, definitely. We do think that both are very important, but essentially it's often in our projects we try to focus on women also because they're a good partner to work with, and they're really trying to build their family and the situation around their family in a good way. We do see that in terms of smartphone farmers, that really there are a lot of women also nowadays with smartphones, at least in the urban areas, and more in the rural segments. Basically, it's a bit of a mix. But I think there's a lot of development in terms of women having more smartphones and being able to bridge that gap as well.
Mrs. Said, you mentioned in your introductory statement the inclusive digital economy, and the strategy paper that you mentioned also encompasses inclusive prosperity. What approach does the Ethiopian government take to achieve their set goals?
Yeah, so thank you. And it's great to learn from other countries as well. Well, what we have done is in the strategies we have really studied how digital agricultural platform can have or the impact that it can have on smallholder farmers. And when I speak about digital agriculture, I mean information services such as farm services, data collection, weather, access to financial services, access to risk coping mechanisms, access to input and output markets. And in each of these categories, we have various players from various organizations within the country. So in terms of trying to be inclusive, it is really to look at these different, let's say, categories, be it on informational services, and looking at how we can make sure that we're inclusive. And like it was said, not only from a gender perspective, but also from a regional perspective. We have many languages, and also access to or phone penetration is relatively low for now. We're just undergoing a liberalization of the telecom, so we expect this to grow rapidly. But for now, access to mobile phone is quite low. And to smartphones in particular. So we've tried to look at different mechanisms, and the Ethiopian Agricultural Transformation Agency, for example, has a call center, a support center, where they can actually have or get information services through a voice recognition, IVR, or USSD. We also have an agent network, like it was mentioned. We have about 15,000 what we call RUSACOs, the rural SACOs around the country that also can be points of information for the farmers. In terms of access to financial services, we have looked at how we can use shops for vouchers to redeem inputs because of the low penetration of banks. Access to risk coping mechanisms, again here, looking at the agent network to provide insurance to remote populations. And yeah, so I think what has been said applies to Ethiopia. But like I said, the ATA has some real concrete, we have, I think now 5 million farmers, smallholder farmers that have registered on the ATA informational services platform, and where information can be disseminated. So yes, so in terms of our attempt to be inclusive, it is really to increase access and to provide as much information through our agent networks and extension workers, basically.
Now you just mentioned the access to digital application. Farmers also often need to enter data on their farming, such as the size of their farm, the crops they cultivate, or the inputs that they apply in order to use these apps. Mrs. Kaiser, K+S is cooperating with the Pan-African tech company MSF Africa Limited, which developed the Easy Agric app that you already mentioned, to digitize value chains. Which data are collected and what happens with these data?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So in the initial stage, basically for us, it's important that the farmer uses the app. So there's not a lot of requirement in terms of data input when he first registers. So what we see in terms of a data strategy and how we want to approach the topic is that we really see a lot of value in sharing that value with the farmer. So to make sure that basically the data that you are collecting, you're also using in the interest of the farmer. And I think we've seen that in other sectors. If we don't look at farming, even now there are companies coming up that are actually giving ownership of the data back to the user, and then you can decide what you want to do with your data. And it's not used simply by the company. And that's kind of a similar thinking that we also have in those terms, that we really want to make sure that the farmer has an interest in sharing his data and that it's being used, for example, and I think that's where one of the biggest values lies also, is, for example, to get financing. So, you know, you're sharing your profile, you're sharing your records and all of this, but in return, you have access to microloans, for example, you get access to insurance, and sort of these things. But in the end, in our partnership, we very strongly believe that that the data ownership or the direction that this is going is really to give it back to the user in the end. I think, you know, there are different directions this can go, and we all know when new technologies are coming up that some take this path, some take another path, but basically, you know, in the mid to long term, I strongly believe that people are understanding more and more the value of data, the value of, you know, my individual data and everyone else's individual data, and that this will be the future for how data will need to be handled.
Mrs. Bassermann, would you like to react to that? Mrs. Kaiser just mentioned the ownership. Is that also what you observe in your studies?
Yeah, it depends. So because we more see clear problems also with data protection and the safety of the data or security, because I heard also of examples where farmers provided information about their yields and about their farming exercises, and then later on they had problems to get insurance because of this, because this data was used the opposite way, because it was quite open. So these are examples that I find quite concerning, and what we see is that in many countries there's still a clear lack of policies and of regulation on data, and so I think there's also always a certain risk that that companies or private sector can use this gap in policies in order to find a way into the market. So that's a risk that we see, and also like a gap that has to be closed by governments basically to come up with the regulation. And I mean, it's the same as many other regions of the world. The regulation had to develop over time. We saw it here in the EU, so it took some steps until we get to this level of regulation we now have. So that's what we find a bit risk. So I think it's always it's always a bit both sides. Also, what I would find interesting, maybe also to know from Ms. Said or also from Ms. Kaiser, that or especially Daniel Wanjama, that do you have information where the data is stored? Because to my knowledge is that most of the data about African countries and about citizens is stored outside the continent. So there it would be interesting for me to learn a bit more about the actual situation, because this I find also a bit concerning.
Thank you for bringing up the complexity and the diversity of contexts in different sub-Saharan countries and regions. We will give the word back to Mrs. Said and Mr. Wanjama in the next discussion. But first we would like to hear some smallholders' voices from across the region to learn how they currently use digital tools and which challenges they face.
Hello everyone, my name is Kato John, a tomato farmer in Wakiso district. So I've been doing tomato farming for the last 5 years. So, but last year, as I was watching TV, I saw this company called Greek. I went ahead, downloaded their app from Google Play Store, and I've been using some of their services. They have a service called garden mapping. When I used it to map my garden, I found out that I had 2.0 acres, and before then I thought I was farming on 3 acres. So it has helped me plan well for my farming. The entire season is planned in advance. These people have been actually providing and supplying me with agro inputs, genuine agro inputs actually, at very good prices, and they have been delivering at my farm in Wakiso. They even go ahead to get market for me. I used to sell at normal prices, but now I sell at premium price, and I'm getting bump harvest because Before that, I used to harvest roughly about 70 boxes per acre per season. But now this last season, I harvested 120 boxes. I sold at premium prices, and I'm finding it actually more profitable these days doing tomato farming. I was planning to quit, but now I'm looking to expand things.
Hi, my name is Betty. I'm a farmer from Kenya. I needed to do some farming, but I didn't know how to go about it. So I checked out on Google to see whether I could get a digital application that will give me more information on how to do my farming. I needed to plant some hass avocados. Well, I got an app that required me to pay some 500 Kenya shillings, or roughly $5, to register myself as a member of their organization. Asked me to pay the registration fee and also to pay some consultation fee so that they can tell me more about soil sampling, fertilizer, how to go about cultivating and planting the trees, how to go about packaging and exporting, which they said they would help me do the marketing. But I was not able to raise all the money that they needed me to raise so that they could gain from their information. Therefore, I was not helped and I did not plant the hass avocados.
Ndi muri watute tishatute kuri ba Zambia breweries. Ero tubonfya umusango wabushitisha mutute tubonfya bankyo. Ero muku bonfya bankyo mwariba ubusuma tamwaba ukwivirwa. Ero kabiri tubonfya paku pokempia mobile utumine mpia mu phone chisuma sana kusungira mu mpia bantu takwaba ukwivirwa.
Hello, my name is Anyam Khalaka from South Africa in a village called Slwana in Palabura. I am a farmer. I'm not alone. I'm with my brother Aubrey. Aubrey, is the time?
Yes, thank you. Yes, indeed. My name is Aubrey. I'm carrying some maize here. The beans, sorghum beer. We used to make an African beer, as well as some meal.
As I said, we are the farmer, farming some meal, also some nuts, also some watermelon. Here we have the big challenge of transporting our crops, also some money for farming. As you can see, we do have the big farm, but in terms of marketing, we use the internet for marketing. We do take a picture, also put in the social media like a Facebook to advertise our crops. Also in terms of the money, also we use the banking.
A very big challenge because we're planting a lot of things here. And we have that big challenge of lack of transport and the customers. I think.
magacaygu waa maxamed axmed maxamuud waxaan ahay beeraley waxaan ka sii ahay dhalinyarada beeraleyda waxaan isticmaalaa teknolojiyada waxaan ka sii isticmaalaa smartphoneskaas oo aan u adeegsado cudurkii iyo cayayaankii iyo cawskii sida aan ugu sawiro oon dadka yaqaana aan dib ugu soo laabto sidoo kale qodobka labaad waxaan u isticmaalaa in smartphoneskaas waxaan u isticmaalaa bareeskii iyo suuqii sidii aan ugu ogaalahay oo beeraley kale aan warbixin aan ku kala qaadi lahayn sidoo kale qodobka saddexaad waxaan u adeegsadaa inaan casharada iyo seminariska social medias la soo dhigayo inaan kala socdo sidoo kale qodobka afraad waxaan u isticmaalaa smartphoneskaas inaan kala socdo smartphoneska raadioga iyo waxyaabahaas oo idaacaduhu ay soo diyaan oo raadiogaas inaan ka dhageysto ayaan isticmaalaa smartphones.
Hi, my name is Ivan Ipanga and I am from Uganda. I'm a smallholder farmer growing mainly bananas, although I intercrop it with a few things like cassava, etc. I use social media to do mainly marketing of my products. I also use it as a learning tool. Sometimes I do some Google searches to find out what's happening in terms of climate change. I also do Google searches when I'm looking for certain disease and herbicides, how I can control diseases on my farm. Then also I use mobile money as a mobile transactional tool to send and receive payments. People paying me if I'm making payments to people. So mainly those are the digital tools I use. Thank you.
Wow, I hope you also enjoyed all of these different perspectives from all across Africa. A quick reminder to the audience to post their content-related questions in the Q&A tool. Please mention which panelists you would like to address, and we will collect them and discuss them in the following section. Maybe you recall Mrs. Bassermann had a question for most of the panelists, but I would like to address first Mr. Wanjama. Where and how is the data stored for your seed saving website?
Thank you. I think that is a big challenge, because we even don't, we have never even thought about that. What we do is we just upload the information, but I'm told it is saved on an online crowd server that belong to Hot Pinnacle, and maybe having very little kind of knowledge on this digital technology make us very vulnerable, in the sense that we don't know, we even keep our data, and we take no effort in protecting our data, and I think it's a challenge and a big risk, because now this is the only time now that I'm thinking about that, because of that question. Yeah.
Okay, maybe we give this question also to Mrs. Said to hear how governmental entities actually ensure data security. Mrs. Said.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very important question. So we have taken data privacy very seriously in Ethiopia. In fact, we have a personal data protection proclamation that is in final stages. It's about to go through the government approval process, then finally to be ratified by Parliament. But yeah, in this proclamation, personal data belongs to the farmer. Currently, I was telling you about the data that we're collecting, the 8028 Farmers Hotline that the Ethiopian Agriculture Transformation Agency has. I was just looking at the numbers. They today have 5.5 million registered callers, and all that resides in Ethiopia. Cloud technology is not yet used in Ethiopia. We are also looking at cloud policies to make sure that we are in control of what we do, which is very difficult. And without cloud, expansion and digitalization is limiting. So yes, we're taking all these questions very seriously, looking at how other countries are suffering from it. So yeah, but for now here in Ethiopia, the risks are quite low.
Yes, indeed, like I think data security and then all that follows with cloud policies, that is also maybe such a big topic. We can actually create a whole new panel discussion, but maybe let's go back to smallholder digitalization, although it's even important for smallholder digitalization. I want to get back to the video or videos we've just seen. Mrs. Bassermann, what do you think about the involvement about the private sector in digitalizing smallholder agriculture? In the first video, maybe you remember the tomato farmer could double his yields with the Easy Agri app.
Yeah, so first I want to say that it was quite interesting examples, and also the example of the seed exchange platform Mr. Wanjama was mentioning is quite very impressive. And at this point, I just want to make clear that I totally see the opportunities and also the advantages these digital tools can have for smallholder farmers. I think one risk is also a question of the interest of the company, or the who benefits the most. I think all those tools and platforms and digital services should be targeted to small scale farmers and must be geared to the needs and rights of small scale farmers, and they should be the ones that profit most of them. And as far as this is guaranteed, I think it's totally fine. I think it becomes problematic when the sales interests of large corporations come in, or when we see examples. I think also input suppliers have been mentioned, when it's really targeted to sell the specific, for example, Green Revolution input supplies, then I find it in some places quite challenging. So what we always claim is that it must have like a really diversity of farming systems. The must be offered. So also agroecological practices, traditional farmer seed systems, sustainable farming practices. I think there must be a variety in the things that are offered to farmers, and I think this must guaranteed. And what we observed in some occasions is that the applications or the tools are not in the first place targeted to the interests of small-scale farmers, and this is what we kind of see critical. Also, issues of market concentrations came already up. So this are the things we are a bit worried about. But I totally see the improvement it can bring. Also, for example, I think besides what was already mentioned about the practices or the seed saving, it's also prices. It can really help to get more transparency into market prices. It's not anymore the dependency on somebody who comes to the farm gate and offers one price. So you can have a better picture on what prices are on the market, and in very remote areas. Also, advantages we have seen is what was also mentioned in the video, that when farmers, the farmer-to-farmer exchange, I think it can really bring a lot of improvements in this horizontal learning and this farmer-to-farmer exchange and knowledge providing, which also Mr. Wanjama was mentioning.
These are really interesting comments, and we have, fortunately, we have a person from the private sector. So, Mrs. Kaiser, I would not only like to hear from you what you think about the comments from Mrs. Bassermann, but also take a step back. Why are companies like K+S suddenly interested, or not suddenly, for a longer time now, interested in smallholder farmers? You mentioned the potential. Can you maybe explain a little bit more? And then, if you want, you can also refer to the comment of Mrs. Bassermann.
Yes, absolutely. I think all the points mentioned are very valid, and I think the point of intent, that's a very important one. And why are you actually trying to do this? Maybe to start from our perspective, it's simply our business model was in the past never really geared at the smallholder farmer, because it was more the mining and then distribution to the different ports, but basically kind of downstream to the farmer was always done by other companies. When we engaged in Uganda specifically on the charity project I mentioned earlier, that's when we saw the potential, and where we also saw that this is if you look at agriculture in Europe or in the US, you're trying to improve yields by maybe a couple of percentage points. If you're lucky, often less. In Uganda, and you've seen the example, I mean, he doubled. You might not always be able to double yields, but we're talking about much bigger potential. And if you're in a market where you can create such big potential and improvement, honestly, like it's much easier to share into the value that you're creating than if you're looking at 0.5 or 1% in improvement. So when you're actually operating somewhere where you can leverage that potential and make such big improvement, then for a company it's a great space, because you can share that value that you are creating with the farmer, and you also you can also work together with other companies, because agriculture is a huge space. The improvement potential is huge. There are so many different aspects to it, and we strongly believe that one company by itself with the capabilities that you have is not able to solve all of this. So you need to have different partners collaborating, and you need to bring together, for example, what are the capabilities that maybe a corporate can bring into this together with a startup, because it's very different. They're much more agile, they're on the ground, they actually know what's happening there, which we sitting in Germany, for example, you don't know, and you can't create that solution. So that's why I'm also very happy to see those videos, because that's where the actual battle is happening. Not in an office in Germany, and not necessarily on Zoom either, but out in the field. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question, but happy to follow up.
No, yes, indeed. I find it quite interesting, actually, that you mentioned local startups, because if we look at smallholder farming, there are not just international big companies involved. There are these creative solutions from agrotech companies, African agrotech companies, working on these creative digital solutions. So actually, maybe I would like to address the next question to Mrs. Said. Which role can these local agrotech startups from African countries play, and how can the government or the state support these enterprises?
Yeah, so whereby we believe that Ethiopia was very much government-led, and 3 years ago, with the change of administration, there was a very strong policy direction to say that the government needs to become an enabler and the private sector needs to lead the development. So taking it down to the agricultural sector and looking at digital Ethiopia, one of the big policy recommendation is to actually develop the agri-tech ecosystem. And the private sector has a very large role to play in this field. I talked about the importance of access to output market services such as digital payment, market linkages, exchanges, warehouse receipts, all of which the tech-enabled ecosystem has a large role to play. In addition to these opportunities, of course, around mechanization services, and for example, Uberizing tractors, or equipment leasing, in other words, having maybe an agricultural leasing market. So, so innovations as a way of improving performance, competitiveness of our producers, and also in marketing and promotion of our producers, right? So we really think it's important to promote agrotech to ensure agriculture remains sexy, if I may, to the youth. Because we see a lot of the youth moving to the urban areas because it's just not interesting for them. But if we start applying, future technologies or innovative technologies, blockchain, we were talking about privacy and starting to apply privacy by design, for example. Or enabling payments. So using artificial intelligence, Internet of Things to improve performance and to improve yield through IoT. Artificial intelligence has an incredible amount of potential. So yes, definitely, tech-enabled ag, mechanization, new tech, e-commerce are all interesting tools to promote, and policy direction and government policies needs to support that. Access to finance needs to be provided to ensure startups or even incubators are supported to make sure this happens.
I'm actually now curious to listen to Daniel Wanjama's opinion, if he also shares your hope that maybe technical tools can make farming or smallholder farming more attractive for young people. Do you share this hope or this vision, Mr. Wanjama?
Yes. Yes, thank you. We imagine so. Actually, we are now targeting youths in developing another platform for exchange of for sale of seedlings online, because that is also a big challenge where people are not able to know which seedlings exist where, and we are targeting youth groups to do that. So I think because of the interest of youths in digital technology, it might help. For instance, even a lot of our members who are supposed to be accessing this online platform directly are not able to do so. And what we tell them to do is to link with their sons and daughters who could be at college and they have a smartphone, because parents or aging farmers, mostly they don't even know how to use it, and they have phones but that are not smart. Everyone in Kenya almost has a phone because of M-Pesa, because phone is where you can receive money, and you could also send money, and you could also take a loan. But a lot of phones that are owned by small-scale farmers are not smart, but the youths have smartphones, and that is where the potential of promoting small-scale or helping small-scale farmers, and also making sure that youths get interested in farming could be tapped.
That's an inspiring outlook. And I think with this, I would hand over to my colleague, Nicolo, who will guide you now through the question and answer from the audience. So, Nicolo.
Thank you. So exactly, now it's time for your questions. If you haven't done so, please post your questions using the question and answer tool down below. And please always indicate which expert you want to address. So let's start with the first question by an anonymous person who has a question for Daniel Wanjama. How do you deal with the digital gender divide within the Seed Savers network?
Okay. Yes. Mostly, of course, the people we have on our platform are mostly women, because the people we upload on the website are people that we work with, that people we have set community seed banks with, and the main reason for seed saving is most of the time having access to nutritious food that is diverse, and women have more interest in that than men, because they want to grow, to feed their families with healthy food. So whenever we come up with that message, like we are telling people whether they would like to have nutritious food, not necessarily about money, but nutritious food, women are always the first to come forward, and therefore they are mostly the one on our platform, but mostly as people who are able also to provide seeds, like they are more custodian of seeds than the people who are like the people who are likely now to look for seeds are perhaps on the other side are men who are like looking for seeds of certain varieties, but women who have been trained and who have embraced seed saving and the diversity are mostly women who are on our side. But it's not a direct, it's not a conscious effort. It's just like who is interested, and the women are the majority.
This is super interesting. Thank you. Yeah. Then let's continue with the next question by Cornelius. Cornelius posed a question to Myriam Said, and the question is that many digital services are provided through platforms to farmers. How do you make sure that these platforms do not get monopoly power and create dependencies and lock-ins for the farmers that use the platforms?
I'm sorry, but I didn't hear the last part. That do not lock in farmers, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, so meaning if the private sector gets involved, we might create dependencies on a certain platform.
I guess it can also be by governmental platforms. It's just that the farmers are then locked into one specific platform that have the monopoly, and then the farmers are basically dependent on this one platform.
Okay, well, I think the best thing to do around there is to make sure that you allow the private sector to innovate and to use human-centered design approaches to make sure that they have products that serve the farmers, and the farmers will decide on which platform serves them best. In terms of locking in the smallholder farmers, I would say more the risk here is really what we discussed around data and what people would do around their data and the security and the privacy around that. But I believe that availing platforms or enabling the market to perform, to innovate, to make sure that we fulfill the objective of the smallholder farmer from a policy perspective. It is really to allow or to provide equal opportunity to everyone, particularly the private sector and the startups and the innovators, and make sure that we have solid data protection and cybersecurity policies. I hope I answered the question.
You did, yes, thank you. And let's move on to the next question by Jean-Pierre Hakisimana, who's the founder of Imena RU Farm Tech from Rwanda. And Jean-Pierre has a question. We didn't state to whom, but I would suggest we hand this question over to Lena Bassermann. So, Mrs. Bassermann, the question goes as follows. In Rwanda, the farmers face challenges with digital literacy and in addition to language barriers that hinder access to digitalization. How can German agencies support smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan African countries?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question and points out some of very burning issues, because I think what has been very clear into our discussion here that the interventions by private sector focuses much more on farmers that are already kind of have a certain amount of land, have a certain amount of knowledge, or are kind of better off already. That's what we see, and that are already included in value chains. That's usually the case. And those farmers who maybe have these language barriers, who have small plots of land, and things like this, these are usually overseen by many of the interventions that are made. And I think that's really crucial to focus especially on these farmers and to see how you can, I mean, I think Ms. Said already mentioned the different languages of services, so that you really make sure that you provide several languages, not only work with written input, also provide videos and things like this to really make sure that you reach many people, also access to very remote areas where you can go and make sure that farmers there also have access to these digital tools. And I think donor agencies or international agencies very much should focus on these marginalized groups, I would say. And what we see now is that also this is not only the private sector, also donor agencies not really focus on these people right now. So and there's also, I think there's an evaluation of a British program by the Official Development Agency, which also says that development programs focusing on digitalization tend to really make the gap even bigger between farmers. So I think this should really be focused on. And also really ask the farmers what they need or what they want or what's really include. I think very crucial is to really include very diverse range of farmers into development of programs, because I mean it should be clear that this is done, but it's not a common. In many cases, it's not been done. So I think really have this co-creation of knowledge and this co-development of programs is, I think, crucial. But I think maybe Mr. Wanjama wants to add something to this.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Mr. Wanjama. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So the part of the problem that people have here is even people like perceive Kenya is like we have better network. It's not true. Some people in the rural area are having very serious problem in terms of connection, and the signal is bad. So even if they are able to communicate with their phone, especially analog phone, they're not able to communicate very well digitally. And that is a problem where it's only private sector that is investing in the communication because they want to make money. We have two companies, I think 3 companies, and they only do their equipment for transmission where they can see big population or people who have money to spend on communication. So the other people are not very deep in rural areas are not served very well. And unless government or someone else who is not interested in profit invest in that area, you might not serve those people very well. And also there is big challenge like what is mentioned here, the capacity to use, because farmers are a bit older and they are not having the proper skills to use the online platform. And of course, others, they don't have enough money to buy the smartphone. And of course, there is also some in the deep interior rural with some communities. There are even cultural beliefs that this technology like of smartphone and all that is evil. So people, the elders tell people don't use it. If you go, and if you use it, we can curse you. So people get so afraid. So even demystifying that and trying to empower the community to be able to appreciate the digital technology is important. But also, for instance, we are using this space for seed movement, but it is not regulated. And lack of regulation is also a risk, because now you see we don't even know where our data is, and no one is really protecting us. So a lot of intervention by government or even development partners need to be in place so that small scale farmers can have equal access to digital and benefit from digitization.
Thank you. That sounded really interesting. And with this, I will go to the next question by Inkota from Sweden, who addresses a question to Janina Kaiser, saying that digitization is modernization. but most of sub-Saharan African countries have internet access problems and also gigabyte costs, which are also a factor to include. And what are your thoughts regarding these limits?
Yes, thank you. I think that's a very important limiting factor, and actually, I think access applies to infrastructure in general. I think not just in terms of access to a smartphone and access to data. I think there are a lot of infrastructure limitations in general that make agriculture inefficient. How I see the development, and I mentioned it earlier, is that I think agriculture is a very complex game in the end, and you have very, very many factors in it. And I think there's not one solution that's going to be addressing all of it. But I think there are a lot of local solutions coming up from startups, from small companies that are developing ideas that address these factors. So for example, I know there's a Kenyan company that has developed like a small brick, it's actually called a brick also, that one can use in a village to give internet connectivity in the village. It was a startup idea, and I think quite an interesting step to do. And I think such developments are super interesting, and they're going to be part of the solution to increasing the infrastructure level, especially also in the countryside. And I think it needs to be accompanied also by the respective policies and government supporting to make sure that there's access for everyone. I think competition coming into the market to provide good data rates, and those things are extremely important. But yeah, I think it's crucial to enable infrastructure on its different levels in order to make this happen.
So still a lot of work to do and a lot of players that have to get involved. Okay. And the next question by Carl Frederick Luthin, addressed to Daniel Wanjama. And the question is whether there's a risk that digitalization disadvantages projects like yours compared to big corporations, for instance, like K+S, that use digital solutions to promote their business model based on hybrid seeds and chemical inputs. Okay, and now reading the last of the sentence, this is not like K+S, I'm sorry for that comparison. So the question is basically whether your Seed Savers network, Mr. Wanjama, is disadvantaged to projects from big corporations that use hybrid seeds and chemical inputs.
I would say yes. I would say yes, because the companies that are using digitalization to market agro inputs, they have a platform much more. And for instance, there is one in Kenya that is coming. There is a program on TV, and there is also an app, and on education. But what people are told is to log in or to download that app and be able to join and be able to benefit with information. But when you ask
Mr. Wanjama, you seem to have problems with your internet connection.
To specific solution, which is hello. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you again. You seem to have problems with your connection, so I didn't understand some of the things you said. Could you maybe try to summarize them briefly again for me?
No, yeah. Sorry. I was saying that, of course, there are people who have big advantage, especially agro input companies who are selling the inputs in using the apps or using the digital technology, because they're able to market. And for instance, a lot of marketing is fashioned as provision of information. So once farmers join, they are like able to ask questions like, for instance, what do I do to my plants when they behave like this? And then the solution is like, buy this. And that way, farmers are not very sure whether the reason, the information provided is objective or it is a marketing. And that way, because of also the money generated from the sales, the platforms that are operated by private sector are always marketed, and they are always promoted through the mainstream media. And therefore, the platforms such as ours can only be used by the members, because then there is no marketing and there is no financial benefit. Thank you.
The next question is by Annette Puffold, directed at Mrs. Bassermann. So many African farmers produce products relevant for the European markets, but do not have access to it. And there are few resellers who get the full benefit, being the bridge between farmer and the European client. And how can digitalization close this gap specifically? Do you know if there's an app bringing together African farmer and European purchasers?
Sorry. There might be, but I'm not aware of a specific app. Sorry. I'm not familiar with a specific one that connects both markets.
Would you see a potential for an app like this, or do you think it's important?
So you mean it's about the direct trade between, so in order to, sure, I mean, I think there are organizations that are doing quite a, or institutions quite a really good work in also direct trading and working with corporations, farmer corporations, and really making sure that farmers get really a certain amount of the money at a right amount, or for their produce. So they might also already work with digital tools. So I would first look at these actors like GEPA or whatever's there on the market. And I think, sure, I mean, I think here we come to a critical point, to my view. Digitalization can only always, in my point of view, always be a technology and seen as a technology that can support certain things, or it can put certain risks on something. So, and also with this trading question, I think the first and most important question is how much money gets a farmer out of this trading deal. So, and if there's an app that makes it easier for farmers to get make a good build a good relationship, or have something he really profits from, then I think it would be very useful for him. I think it always depends on the conditions and everything and the setting around. It cannot. So I think this is really important also when it comes to the debate on what can digitalization and what can it not. And I often read that digitalization will end hunger or something like this. And I think this is a really misleading debate, because it's not an end itself. It's just a technology. And to really improve certain conditions for farmers, there are many structural questions, also especially in the trading field, that really has to change to make many things work better for farmers. And it cannot really, I think, this whole debate about a technique can really overshadow some of the really structural issues that still has to be solved. And I think this also always has to be taken into account when discussing technologies.
Yeah, Mrs. Said, do you want to reply?
Yeah, no, just briefly, I think direct trade models are super important for smallholder farmers. For example, just to give you an example, in coffee, Ethiopia is the origin of coffee. We have actually extremely good quality coffee in Ethiopia, but our farmers and our smallholder farmers are actually the ones that receive the least income in the world. So you see Colombia, Brazil, Vietnam, really performing in coffee, and the smallholder farmer really performing in coffee. In our case, our smallholder farmers produce exceptional exceptional quality of coffee that are capped at, I don't know, maybe if they're coffee experts, but at 88 plus. This year with the Cup of Excellence, we've had coffees above 90 and up to 91, capped at above 91. But we do not have, we didn't have platforms connecting the farmer to the consumer, so that, you know, all these middle chains can be minimized for the farmers to increase their income. So we just launched, actually yesterday, a micro lots a trading platform where farmers will be able to actually bring their produce. And micro lots are usually very small quantities of coffee, but exceptional coffees with very high prices, where the smallholder farmer will be able to sell its coffee directly to the exporters for now, and then eventually with technology platforms, maybe an e-commerce platform that will have auction capabilities and payment capabilities, access roasters directly. So I think it's really important. It's a very important question. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing also your insight. Unfortunately, we have to move on, and we are done with the question and answer session, even though I see that there are many more questions that you would like to raise. And I thank you for your active participation, dear audience. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Felix Higeler and Gabriela Degen, who supported me with the question and answer session. Now, before we start with the final discussion, we will play our third and last video in which we tell 2 fictional stories of smallholders.
This is Lena, a smallholder in Sub-Saharan Africa.
And this is her neighbor, the farmer Paul.
Both are planting maize. This season, they're very unlucky as their maize is infested by worms. As a result, they can neither sell nor eat maize. Following the infestation, Leila decides to install several applications on her phone to help her cope better next time. She uses these apps to apply for a loan to afford new seeds and inputs, and buys a micro insurance for her crops, and learns from an online extension service how to diversify her crops.
Paul, on the other hand, chooses to install a single application which offers many different services. He receives a weather forecast, applies for a loan to purchase new maize seeds, and inputs such as fertilizers.
In the new season, Leila plants a variety of crops from seeds that she bought from her loan. She also buys fertilizers and pesticides. In the end of the season, Leila can proudly present a decent harvest. She compares market prices and sells her produce on an online marketplace for a very good price. Leila also contacts farmers in her area to form a cooperative in order to support each other and to jointly rent a tractor. Collectively, they sell their harvest, celebrate an epic party, and even commonly save some money for the next planting season in a digital saving group.
Paul's app requires him to sign a contract which he doesn't understand. He's now obliged to buy the company's high-yielding seeds and their inputs with a loan he received from the company. Nevertheless, Paul is happy because his yields increase quickly. A salesman from his contract partner inspects his land and advises Paul on how to farm maize. Paul sows the company's seeds, applies its fertilizers, harvests a good amount of maize, and makes a lot of money, which he doesn't need to share with a cooperative.
Unfortunately, a second worm infestation hits Leila's and Paul's maize. Luckily, Leila can still sell her pumpkins and beans. Even better, she can make use of her crop insurance to buy new seeds and to replant maize. Despite the crisis, she can still sell a harvest. Lucky Layla!
Paul is also affected by the worm infestation. Paul is really desperate. All his maize is gone, and since he hasn't planted any other crops, there is nothing he can eat or sell. In his great need, he tries to buy new seeds through his app, but his order is not approved because he has not paid back the loan for the last seeds and inputs. Paul is caught in a debt trap now. He has nothing to harvest and sell to return his loan. This year, Paul is struck by bad luck. He cannot send his kids to school anymore.
Meanwhile, Layla and her cooperative receive the payout of their digital saving group. They invest in an automatic sprinkler irrigation system on their collective field. Now they have a reliable water supply and can plant even more crops. Layla is happy that she can withstand this year's difficulties. For her family, she can cook nutritious meals, and she can afford to send her kids to school.
For Paul, the next season is a disaster. The soil is depleted from the high-yielding variety and he cannot afford new seeds. The salesman from Paul's contract partner reminds him of his unpaid loans. Paul is now forced to sell his land to the company in order to clear his debts. Now he lost everything. Paul witnesses how the company installs high-tech infrastructure on his former land. The large-scale agriculture is automated and based on modern irrigation systems and drones instead of labor forces. In order to survive, Paul now has to move to a large city where he looks for a job.
Layla hears about the bad fate of her neighbor Paul and wants to help him out, but unfortunately, he's already gone.
In this last discussion, we would like to look to the future. We will first briefly discuss the two scenarios we just saw in the video, and will then give each panelist the opportunity to share his or her vision on how the digital transformation of smallholder agriculture in Sub-Saharan Africa can be shaped in a way to benefit all. Mr. Wanjama, do you consider one or even both of these scenarios that we just saw in the video realistic or likely to happen in the Kenyan context?
Thank you. Yes, the issue of commercialization of agriculture, or the issue of overburdening of farmers, making farming expensive in a way that it doesn't pay anymore, is already happening here in Kenya, where farmers are required to buy inputs, buy everything, and in essence, the money doesn't come back because they have no access to market. So even after spending money in production and they are small scale, the money doesn't come back because they are small scale. So that is why we have a situation where youths are no longer wanting to do farming. So they would rather go to urban areas and stay even idle than engage in farming, because farming is expensive and it doesn't eventually bring money back. And the situation is real. And of course, if you want money to do some farming, yeah, you have some offers. There are banks that are offering money so that you buy the inputs, but they don't show you where to sell your produce so that you recover your money.
Mrs. Kaiser, how can the private sector contribute to prevent a dystopia, as we have seen in Paul's story and as Daniel Wanjama has just mentioned?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think, as I mentioned earlier also, I think you'll always have good and bad examples when people are coming up with solutions. And I don't think we'll be able to avoid this entirely. I think there will always be players who maybe not have the best in mind on farmers. But on the other hand, we also have to mention that not every farmer is really, always pushing in the right direction and fully engaged. I mean, there are also, let's say, bad examples there when it comes to providing loans, when it comes to side selling and such topics. So I think there are always good and bad examples on all sides. I think where the private sector has a responsibility is in terms of, finding solutions where all sides can profit from. And I think everyone, in terms of like society, I think everyone also has a responsibility to look after that, and demanding from companies that they look in that direction. I think there are, so many examples out in the world where things are not happening in the right way, and many people are looking away. And I think it's if there's more, maybe more publicity or more awareness from the people on things that are happening, there's also more pressure on companies to act in the right way. So I think in those terms, we all as individuals have some responsibility in this, not to look away, and to look at what's happening actually out there, and put a little bit of pressure on every single player in the system. But I think again that it's we need to be careful that I think it's not going to be A or B. I think even if you have a perfect solution, you'll always have bad examples in them. Not everything is going to go right always, and that's important to consider as well. I think what in the end is important is that we're taking a few more steps forward than we're taking backwards, and that we're moving this in the right direction, and that we keep applying pressure, and that we keep coming up with better solutions so that we challenge the bad examples, and yeah, make sure that that these things don't necessarily happen.
Mrs. Said, Mrs. Kaiser just mentioned that sometimes maybe some pressure needs to be applied. How can the government contribute to protect farmers from such large debts, while at the same time enabling them to invest in their own production systems?
Yeah, I think like it was said, I mean, there's no silver bullet there, but one thing to be done is really to put the smallholder farmer at the center and understand what his cycles are. And I mean, the scenarios of Paul happen. We have in Ethiopia, we have the largest bank, not banks, but sorry, I forgot the name. The microfinance. Yes, the largest microfinance in Sub-Saharan Sub-Saharan Africa. So, and they provide a lot of loans to smallholder farmers, and we see, I mean, we've been hit this year by locusts, by war, so there's been many challenges. So putting the smallholder farmer and understanding his journey is quite important. So, but also, education. So saying, insurance policies, micro insurance is important. Providing, we give a lot of subsidies around inputs and seeds, providing information service as much as possible. So supporting the understanding the smallholder farmer journey and supporting him in his journey is important. And I think that's what government roles should be, and I hope are in most parts of the world. And obviously it's a sector that still requires a lot of subsidy. So yeah, policy needs to be centered around the journey, and unfortunately, and even in growing economies, I mean, I think in the US, smallholder farmers are still subsidized at 50%. So yeah, so I think for now, and until we find the right applications with the right adoption and reach to Laila's case, these kind of policies needs to be in place. Yeah.
Mrs. Bassermann, do you agree? Are subsidies the way to go, or what has to happen so that more smallholders benefit from the digitalization?
Yes, I think subsidies have definitely play a crucial role, but the question, what is going to be subsidized? And I think, yeah, in many African countries, the subsidy system is much more in favor of this this green revolution package that we have seen with Paul. So I think there needs to be a shift for subsidy schemes systems more towards diverse agroecological practices, and so the question what is supported by government is very crucial. What kind of practices, and how to make digitalization work for many people. I think many points have already been raised to really, as also Mr. Said mentioned, put farmers in the center and the core. Make, like in Laila's example, it's digitalization was used as a tool to support the things she wanted to do or encourage her to get in this direction, and she was able to have a diverse a diverse sustainable farming system, to have established a functioning cooperative, also with the money saving and everything. So I think to work more in this direction, try to be as inclusive as possible and to include as many people as possible. And I think we always come back to the question of access here, and to really work on closing divides and really make sure that that they don't even get bigger, the gaps. And also make sure that you don't transform like a very unsustainable system like this one Paul has proven. This existed before digitalization. It's just this this industry-driven system. Try not to replicate it with digitalization. So step away from it, try to transform it. I think this is very, very crucial. And
I think you mentioned already a lot of points that should be considered on the way forward. So building up on that, Mrs. Said, what is your vision of a digitalized agriculture in Ethiopia?
So, we have a 10-year plan that has just been ratified. It's our 10-year development plan. And the vision is to make Ethiopia a beacon of prosperity. And I believe that this will benefit the entire Sub-Saharan Africa region. So given the importance of agriculture today in the potential it has for food supply, it will continue to be a fundamental pillar of our economies, right? So making optimal use of new and emerging technologies to modernize the agricultural sector is of utmost importance. So two points really is to enhance productivity, so capture data as much as possible, do data processing and dissemination, providing services for farm productivity enhancement, like virtual extension services on pesticide usage, for example, crop rotation, or localized weather forecasts. So really empowering the smallholder farmer, right? I was saying putting the smallholder farmer in the center, enabling access to markets, showing which markets offer the highest price for their crops, providing access to finance to achieve inclusive prosperity, impact jobs, exports. We need to ensure access to finance and to affordable seeds are available. I was also referring to agtech entrepreneurship. So the essential or the vision that we have here is really to make sure that the youth is encouraged by the results in ag. So encouraging them by providing them consistent and effective support to transform their technology idea into an enterprise and revolutionize the agriculture. So, impact jobs and technology entrepreneurship is really gaining momentum in Ethiopia through an initial wave of technology startups. So supporting those initiatives from the government side is really important, and it needs to be further supported and incentivized in a sustainable way.
Building up on entrepreneurship, Mrs. Kaiser, what does your vision of a just transformation of smallholder agriculture look like?
Yes, I fully agree with Ms. Said in terms of building those local solutions. And I don't know if it became clear in what I've said previously, but Easy Agric is actually, it's a local tech startup Uganda. So it's a local Ugandan team, and K+S is just a minority investor in the company. And I think those local solutions, like grassroots, local people from the ground who know the country, who know the areas that they are working in, I think those are key to making this work. And I think it's not just going to be one solution that's going to be out. I think there are, solutions for the very different challenges that are out there. And by all of those coming together, you're actually going to be able to transform agriculture. Of course, this has some very, very big building blocks. Infrastructure, we already mentioned. Education, I think, is huge because, when we talk about literacy of farmers, when we talk about understanding what am I signing, demanding, the right conditions for a transaction you might be doing, I think education is key, but also transparency. And I think digitalization is a huge opportunity for transparency, knowing where something is coming from. Also cutting out a lot of middlemen where you're using a lot of value that doesn't go to the farmer, and understanding where this can go in the end. So looking at the transparency also, if we look at this from a European perspective, knowing where my product is coming from, which farmer produced this and how much of a share did he actually have in this. And here again, digitalization can really provide that opportunity to provide the transparency and actually make that happen. And then lastly, also following up on what Saeed said in terms of data, making sure that we understand agriculture in the different countries and what's actually needed, what is being produced, what is needed in terms of consumption, and how can we make a better link between the two and make sure that the supply chain is efficient and value goes to the right parties. But yeah, again, just want to stress, I think the grassroots local solutions, I think that's going to be the way, because that's where really innovative solutions are coming up, and where people, these are people who really want to change what's happening on the ground and make things more efficient. And I think that's one of the key things.
Mrs. Bassermann, you already gave some sort of an outlook, but would you still like to add anything to your vision?
Yes, I already mentioned the point of access. I also think it's very important for farmers to have a choice in terms of which farming approaches they choose, to have really access to alternative approaches also, to be them in control of their own knowledge and in control of their data, and also can use digital tools to share their knowledge of traditional seed systems, of sustainable agricultural practices, and so on. And I think the core point of my vision is that digitalization has the interests of farmers as its core and supports this from which they benefit the most. So be it through better income, through better prices, be it through labor facilitation, better connectivity, knowledge dissemination, and so on. So, but one point I really want to strengthen in this discussion is that I really perceive in all this technology discussion that this discourse is kind of shifting. And I think we really need to consider that hunger and poverty is a human rights problem. And we will see an increasing number of people their human right to food is violated. And I think in all this discourses on technology, we should not overshadow the core structural problems that lead to hunger and malnutrition globally. And also in Europe and North America, food poverty is a growing issue. So I think, we really, besides this technology discourse, we really need to strengthen this human rights discourse and should not let it step away while talking too much about technology from the really core issues. So I think this is something I find quite important to say at the end.
Mr. Wanjama, a final word from you. What is your vision of a digital transformation of agriculture where no one is left behind?
Thank you very much. Generally, the farmers in Kenya, 70% of them are small scale, and the government and most agrochemical industry has been pushing industrial farming technologies to the smallholder farmers, which has been a failure. for all these years, because farmers have become poorer, and of course, food insecurity has grown. Now, I think for digitization of smallholder farmer should lead farmers into agroecology sort of production systems, where farmers should be able to buy less things and be able to produce their own food and be able to feed their families and be able to live healthy. And of course, the one big challenge we also have as small scale farmers is access to markets. The industrial farming system is saying that buy all these items, but they don't show us where to sell our goods. Again, digitization should help farmers access agroecology market so that people can be able to have sustainable income from their small scale farming. Thank you.
Wow, that was quite an inspiring outlook. And with that, I'm pleased to hand back to Joel.
Thank you, Johanna. Indeed, what an inspiring discussion, really exciting. I don't know where to start. We talked about so much today, but I think what all the panelists wanted to try to express, that we have to put the smallholder into the center of attention. We have to listen to them, and digital solutions, there won't be the one solution which can solve everything. There should be like grass-centered approaches, then we get closer, can improve step by step. So maybe we take a deep breath, and now the last words of this event will follow. We would appreciate if you would give us feedback on today's discussion. You can find a link for an evaluation in the chat now. Yeah, and then the last words would be our thank you and our final remarks. We would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our wonderful speakers and the wonderful discussions we had for the active participation at the panel. And we had a huge team in the background. I'd like to mention Felix Hegeler, Gabriela Degen, Thomas Beuter, Lukas Eichter, and Hannah Redders. A big thank you goes, of course, to our hosts, the SLE and the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, for giving us this wonderful platform. And also for a thank you goes out, of course, to the audience for staying with us this afternoon. In the following weeks, we will publish also a briefing paper based on today's discussion, so stay tuned, it's really worth it. We would also like to invite you to tomorrow's panel discussion, which is about certification or cotton certification, about more sustainable clothes. So you should definitely check this out. So at the end, there's only thank you for your attention, and we wish you a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much.
Oh, goodbye.
The panelists can come in on a voluntary basis to an end session in another Zoom room. We send you the link.